Hello, this is Chucky from C. Delano Photography, and today I'm going to cover something that Adobe has just released with Lightroom, and that is the texture slider. Now I'm going to cover a few other things, what the texture slider is, and compare those to some of the other things that we know and love, like the clarity, contrast, and the sharpening slider. So let's just jump right in. I have this photo here, and I have this set so that you can see the before and after. The texture, clarity, and the contrast sliders, right now as they sit, they affect the whole image. So let's take a look at our histogram and see what the contrast slider does. Just as a review, we take the contrast slider to the right, and what it's doing is it's dropping a lot of the midtones, as you can see, and it's pushing everything to the dark and light so that there's a lot of contrast in there. So that's what contrast does, makes things a little bit punchier. Let's take a look at what the clarity does. Very similar, it's starting to push everything away from the middle, and it's giving us a grittier look, but it doesn't quite bump up the dark and the light, the highlights and the shadows, quite as much as the contrast slider. Last but not least, let's go on down and let's take a look at the sharpening slider. I'm going to go down to the sharpening slider, and as you can see on this one, it adds a lot of grain, but it does kind of noticeably make things look a bit sharper. I'm going to slide this back down. So what does the texture slider do? Well, let's take a look at what this one does. If I slide this to the right, you can see the histogram is barely moving. It is very subtle, and what it's doing is it's adding a little bit of what looks like a tiny bit of contrast and clarity, but it's defining the edges just a little bit more. So if you want to have that look across your entire photo, let's take a look at that. You can add the texture slider, and it gives it kind of that grittier look, and it puts a little bit more emphasis on some of the facial features right there. But let's say that you don't want the whole photo to have that specific look. Maybe you just want to have that look in the face. I'm going to take this texture slider down until it hits 0. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the brush, and when you click on the brush, you'll notice the same thing over here. You have texture right there. So we can bump this texture up. Right now I have my brush size set to 16. It's a little bit feathered, and it's not quite at 100% flow, and I have the auto mask off. So when I start painting this right here, it's not going to give me a lot of effect until I start really painting in on his face. And as you can see, let's go back. We're at 100% texture. I'm painting in right in here, and it's giving more definition in the face as if he's agonizing just a little bit more. As you can see here on the left and the right, a little bit darker in some places, and there's some more definition in there. But let's say I wanted to do the opposite and take some of those wrinkles out. I could take this texture slider and bring this to the other side, and as you can see, it kind of softens up some of that face, takes out some of the sweat right in there, and it makes a softer picture. So if I take this back out to fit, the rest of the photo is exactly the same, but his face has a little less texture. So you can either dial up the texture or you can take some of the texture out. Let's jump into another photo that I took in New York. I'm going to zoom in to 1:1 here, and you can see that there is a little bit of noise, some color noise in here. I am going to take the texture slider, going to zoom it all the way down to -100, and then I'm going to start painting on her face. What that's going to do is it's going to smooth it out without taking too much of that sharpness away, and it's going to provide us with a little less color noise on her face. So as I start painting here, you will see that the color noise is starting to kind of disappear. It's blending that in really nice there. And when I'm done, if you look side by side right here, there's some color noise, and it's much softened up. Now if I dial this in to 100%, you can see that it's very noisy right there. So on some portraits, you can take the texture and you can take some of the lines out of that without taking too much of the sharpness out. I'm going to take one last photo here. of this truck. And this time, instead of using the brush, I am just going to do a texture slider on the entire truck. So let's go down here and let's take a look at this. I'm going to zoom that thing all the way to 100, and you can kind of see right there that it gives it a little bit more punch. It's a little bit more gritty. The rust right here looks like it's a little bit darker, and there has some more texture on this. So that is the Adobe Lightroom texture slider. You can either use it across the entire image, or you can select one of your tools that are up here. If you also use the gradient tool, you'll notice that the texture slider is inside your gradient tool as well as the brush tool. I hope you liked that video, quick video on what the texture slider does in Lightroom. If you haven't done so already, please give me a thumbs up and a like, and I will catch you in my next video.